but it's also interesting to see flowers on the ceiling. I mean, this whole place is full of inversions, right? I mean,
Yes.
things are inverted, right?
Right.
The plane is inverted, the soldier is inverted, the barrel of the gun is inverted, there's lots of inversions, right?
Right.
So what is all these inversions? The planes are crashing, the space shuttle is blowing up, what is all this?
That's an inversion even of the notion of domestic tranquility, which is part of our constitutional
Right, guarantees. We like to say, right.
We have a room filled with images of violence and destruction and hellfire and brimstone, and yet combined with metaphors of abundance and growth and fertility even. I mean, the beautiful in the Burkean sense, right? 18th century sense, related to the notion of the proliferation of form, right? Of nature.
This is proliferated.
This is proliferation.
You might say proliferation. We are seeing proliferation right here.
Billowing, extended proliferation here, and yet it's all in this nexus again of death, of violence, of even this virtual certain knowledge that this whole place is going to get torn down. Therefore, it's all right to go ahead and do it, right? Because the building is doomed. Therefore, in an act of whatever defiance as well as of exuberance, there's an attempt to one more time do it to the landlords of the world, and create a living experience that otherwise they would not permit. Those are kinds of inversions too. I should put it this way: which do you see this as? A metaphor for death, or a metaphor for life? Which does it provoke in you? Or in fact, well, let's start with that. Is it even fair to raise it on those terms?
Well, I mean, it's filled with death and destruction. There's no doubt about it. So many of the themes have to do with death and destruction, and yet I don't feel that I've sort of entered into a kind of horror chamber like they have in. I mean, it's not fearful. I mean, there's too much humor, and the humor comes in through the ridiculousness of the inversions, right? So the humor is what takes the edge off that. It's only after all when you start to think about it and look at this particular room as opposed to some of the others that you get that sense of death and destruction, particularly technological death and destruction, and very dramatic too, right? All of these plumes of smoke and the shuttle and the planes and the guns and all the rest of it. But because there's so much humor in it, it takes the edge off that. I mean, I don't feel like it's a threatening environment. And the inversions are all over. The notion that what we sort of lump together under modernism had a future orientation, right? That it was utopian in its orientation. That is to say, that the world would catch up. I mean, this is true even of Schroeder's and Merzbow and all the rest of it. It was informed by a kind of utopian vision.
Certainly, that's one aspect of the avant-garde. Another would be the notion that the son will kill the father. That things will, in that sense, there will be progress, right? That the next generation will supersede the previous one.
Right, and those things are going to continue. It has, in a way, that utopian end, right? That there will be a time in which we arrive at a location in time and space in which all this stuff will be fulfilled. There is a kind of pessimism involved, and there is a kind of a lack of faith that it's going to be better.
So we're rolling, and so here we are. We are considering the end somewhere
of this movie,
right?
Movie. That's what we decided we might want. Yeah, because Elizabeth told us that how the movie's going to end, boom, right?
Right, which is in turn a metaphor or something for how things ought to be or are going to be, which is extremely pessimistic, don't you think? boom. That's the only way out, not with a whimper, but a bang. And so,
This is the way the world ends, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper, right? That's
Right.
T.S. Eliot, by the way. So you think it's gonna end not with a bang, but it's gonna end with a bang, not a whimper,
not a whimper.
right?
It seems like that's the premise of this movie. It's going to end with a bang, not a whimper.
Right, so that troubles you, right?
Yeah.
Because you think it's a cop-out.
Yeah.
Because you think, so why do you think it's a cop-out?
Well, for one thing, it leaves very few other choices. For another, it's the simplest response to pressure. To throw a tantrum or
Right, you don't know what to do with them, you kill them, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And certainly this place is pressured. I mean, we're all pressured. This place represents a response to the pressure of being told you're going to get out of here. Someday this won't be.
You know, this place is all about destruction. It's all about threat. It's like all of these things coming out on the walls and the Challenger over here on the airplanes and everything and all the rest of it. It's about that. I mean, it's about disaster. It's about particular events of disaster. So doesn't there seem to be something after all which is justified and right?
What this is a quote unquote energized creative response. It's a production. The response is to produce, not to destroy. In the creation of this stuff, that's the first response, and maybe the most hopeful and maybe the most authentic response to threat. So that there's a great creative energy has been released here in response to the threat of destruction. Does this generation expect that the future is going to be worse than the present? It seems so.
We were saying that at least attributed, if not to our generation, to generations back there a little bit, was the notion that after all, the future was going to be better, and not only
Than the present.
than the present, not only that the future was going to be better than the present, but also that in some ways that art could contribute to the improvement of that future, that art had a capacity to save the world.
Exactly.
That
The
it
term
was-
avant-garde meant that represented that kind of hope, even though it was a military term.
Right, well, sure, and that
It represents that front edge.
somehow out of it was going to become, something that was better, something that was more fulfilling, something that was, in a way, more radical at the same time, and that the world would eventually catch up with what this vanguard was already thinking about in regard to the way people should live and the sensitivities that they should have, and the manner in which, I guess more important than anything else, they could deal with notions of truth, all right, and immediacy and directness and honesty and penetration in the sense of getting to the core of things, getting to the fundamental realities and the primal verity, so to speak. And that now there is a feeling that the future is not going to be better, and we are all in the midst of a whole series of potential disasters which are running all around us, and which we experience a great deal, of course, on the television, which at the same time distances us from all of that stuff. And here it is in kind of miniature, all sort of come to life with all of this iconography. You called it last time. You called it a kind of ballet of disaster, right? Wasn't that your term? I thought that was a pretty good term, a kind of ballet of disaster. But it seems to me that given, all right, so it's a ballet of disaster, so why not end it the way about what it's all about, and blow it all up and let it all come true and all the rest of it.
It's a way of what was it then? A way of rehearsing defeat by imaging it enough so that before it happens, so that you can accept it when it does.
Before we get to the end
Even
of
though
the
we're
movie,
gonna be after
there's
that.
always the question about where they're going to put us. Of course, you know where we may end up on the cutting room floor.
That's right.
All right, so I want you to do a good job.
All right,
Right,
so
because, I
we
mean-
might. Otherwise, coda is our fate. Maybe.
Right. All right.
At
So,
best.
are we rolling?
Yes.
Well,
All
we're
right. So, all
We're on
right.
a groove.
Now, all right. So you were talking about the ending, right? And you didn't like the idea of the ending. that
Yeah.
they should take this house outside and blow it up, right?
Blow it up, yeah.
Right. So why didn't you like it?
No, because it
Sounding
represents.
like a cool analytical mind here. At work here.
It represents it represents a simplistic, reductive equation of passion and intensity with destruction, and finality with the ending, and that to me is all disappointingly inadequate.
Yeah, it has a little bit also of the feeling that, like I said before, that if you don't, if you don't know what to do with them, you kill them at the end, right? Because
Yeah.
that sort of gets rid of them, right? But I think you could.
Or if you're a victim, if you perceive yourself as a victim, or at least as the passive receiver of action, then a tantrum is about all you've got left as a gesture, and that's not effective, even though it is perhaps satisfying.
Yeah, I think I could see a way in which it might be possible to argue the other case in this particular situation. That is to say, and proper for the whole
Sure.
thing to end in its own immolation, right?
But that's taking the
follow.
suggestion way too literally, because at the same time, to literally carry it through as a complaint at the end, it seems to me to be sad and unnecessary, and maybe even mistaken. And it goes back to the question of.
Well, when we talked last time, we were talking about the notion that in some.
I hope it wasn't the last time.
Well, not the last time
Oh,
you and I talked. Last time we talked under these conditions
Previous.
in this room previously. Our previous conversation with regard to this.
Because meanwhile, the landlord probably was laughing all the way to the bank, licking his chops and rubbing his hands together.
Well,
Because there's somebody else out there who thinks all this is great, perhaps. Because that's to say, those who have the power to determine the fate of this place. It's just that we can identify with the people who live here, as being the victims of a process rather than the producers of one.
I'm not entirely convinced that indeed is the case. You used the word before. You used the word tantrum. Well, in some ways, you can think about this whole place as a tantrum,
Yeah.
right? You can think about this whole place
I
as
think so.
that kind of thing, which you could never really get away with within the confines of a family home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, after all, I have kids, and there was always the business about the room, right? And all the rest of it. Even though I tell you, I wasn't hard-nosed about that, but there was a way in which somehow that fantasy of being able to create it exactly the way one would want, no matter how crazy it is, there was a kind of tantrum involved in that. And then here the tantrum comes along with all these events of disaster. So maybe maybe that's the final thing, the final tantrum. Maybe you can make it into a tantrum, or the whole thing blow up. You need a kind of prior catharsis here,
Yeah.
right? In which you live out the disastrous end even before it happens, right? Because you're gonna make a model and you're gonna blow up the house and all the rest of it.
It's sort of the reverse of Rambo, which is a post facto, effort to, through successful deployment of violence, win what had been in fact lost. Well, this is a creative and intelligent inversion of that.
Yeah, and there's a way. You think about all the stuff in here. There's a way in which you can say, well, it's very convenient. You want to light a cigarette, you should cigarette lighter, right? Clean your nails, or sharpen your pencil. There it is over there, and everything is hanging down. The telephone's hanging down. No doubt they all work and all the rest of it. There's a way in which it also becomes kind of frightening. It becomes a kind of threatening, attacking. All of these conveniences. I think I would go crazy here.
What was the expression? Ultimate? Total convenience producing ultimate horror? Is that
So if you don't like that ending, if you don't like the ending of the whole thing blowing up, what ending would you like for this film?
I really don't know what to say. I don't. Okay. Excuse me. We can read that, right? Rolls on. Okay, so this is a rhetorical question,
But then I don't have to answer it.
or you don't have to give the right answer.
Oh,
All right, because there's any number of answers that you would probably produce. So the rhetorical question, I suppose, is based on a false dichotomy. Okay. Right. I mean, remember the old historical rhetorical questions. You know, the Renaissance, the end of the Middle Ages, or the beginning of the modern mind. Right.
Right, there's a colon after the Renaissance, right? Yeah, right.
Those little exercise monographs. Okay, so here's the question. Here we are in a room exuberantly filled with images of death and destruction. Do you see this? Do you see this as as?
Like, I like what you said before, in terms of the affirmation of the future as opposed to the questioning of of future possibilities. And I was just reading an essay. Matter of fact, the essay was the introductory essay to the catalog of David Sally's work down in New York. And I'm sure it's been said before. As a matter of fact, when I read it, I realized I had read it before. Where the writer of this essay was saying it's precisely the opposite in regard to some more contemporary work, that is to say,